The Charismatic Bishops Conference has proposed 4 key initiatives which says that the Lord's prophetic words to Ghana are to do new thing in the nation. Now, on education, that's the educational sector, the conference wants government to reintroduce the O and A-level education system.
In a communique, the conference proposed 4 key initiatives which it says are the Lord's prophetic words to Ghana to do a new thing in the nation. On the education sector, the conference wants government to reintroduce the O and A-level educational system. According to the conference, the JHS and SHS is an inferior form of education because international universities require SHS graduates to do a foundational course for a whole year before admitting them to the university. On the poultry industry, the conference is calling on government to ban the importation of chicken to save the industry and create employment. On road infrastructure, the conference, in its communique, called for a shift from asphalt road construction to the use of concrete.
So the conversation keeps going on and on. And this afternoon, I do have in the studio Reverend Midday. He's a General Secretary, Charismatic Bishops Conference. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And thanks for your time.
Pleasure
now,
for having me.
As a country, we've tried several educational systems, and it's been years since the issue about O and A levels came up. What is really the concern? Is it about quality of education in our system?
The educational system we're currently running in the country, the JHS and SHS system, are essentially an inferior system to what we've ever had before. And we're calling it inferior because of the results that it's produced. We're calling it inferior because of the credibility issues that it has. I mean, the leakages of these exams from WAEC, for instance, has meant that people don't trust the exams that the students who are going through SHS and SHS. People don't trust these exams. The students can't learn without having seen leaked papers. So you get a big credibility issue. You get international recognition of your typical Ghanaian student being withdrawn. And you get a lot of students coming out of school today who can't read and write properly at the standards that you expect. But thankfully, this country has had a system before that people will finish A-levels and straight enter Oxford or Harvard. And in the same breath, we're thinking, if we've had that system before and it's worked, and it's produced students who have been internationally recognized, then after 60 years, it makes a lot of sense to go back to that system, to let the JHS terminate with an O-level certificate, to let the SHS terminate with an A-level certificate, because those are standards that have produced outputs that we're comfortable, that we're happy with. Those are educational certificates that have been recognized internationally. And we believe that on this Jubilee, that's what the Lord is telling the government and the people of the country, that go back to this educational system and you'll be able to have the people educated in the manner that you need to be able to develop your country.
Now, on this bit about O-level, A-level, in the past, putting that together, we have 7 years. And in your press release, one of the concerns you raised was that politicians who can afford send their children to private institutions that run some of these programs. Now, what evidence do you have that politician A, B, C, or how many politicians are you aware, if I ask you to state, have their children who've passed through this process or are still going through this process?
Okay, so I'll take a question in a number of bits. The first one is the bit where you speak about the politicians who have gone to these schools, and the second bit is the bit where you speak about the educational system itself. So on the politicians, yes, there are politicians who've sent their children. Your typical well-off person goes and does O-level and A-level. And if you go to schools like SOS, GIS, TIS, you will find prominent people having their children in these schools.
If you say prominence, it's a broad spectrum. You categorically stated politicians.
Yeah,
so
we have.
Who are these persons that you're talking about? And obviously they can't afford it. That's how come they send their children to those schools.
So our point, which is why I don't want to get into the main thing I was mentioning, is our point is not so much that these politicians have done anything wrong necessarily. Our point is more the fact of a recognition that educational system is acceptable, it's internationally recognizable. The education that your children get there is far more credible than what the vast majority of Ghanaians are getting from what they will do in your typical school. So we're saying if the prominent people in our society, if politicians who run the country are recognizing that these schools are running a particular system that they prefer for their children, why don't we find a system that allows all of this to be available to the vast majority of Ghanaians? And it's not so much about scrapping what we currently have, but we're saying you've got JHS, you've got SHS, where you're speaking about the 7-year issue. Not necessarily scrap it, but JHS is 3 years. Let it not terminate in some JHS certificate, which we currently call BECE. Let the syllabus be in such a way that the curriculum that's taught is an O-level curriculum. The certificate that you receive is an O-level certificate. And we actually go on to show how we think this can be implemented by coming up with even competitive examining councils, all of them running these O-level, A-level. We talk about teachers being upgraded, their skills, the curriculum that they're teaching, the ability to teach the O-level syllabi, so that they can actually teach these courses in the regimented O-level way. And JHS, 3 years, let it be that. Let it terminate not with this not so credible BECE, but let it terminate in the far more superior O-level. Same thing with SHS. SHS shouldn't terminate with WASI. Let it finish and let the students leave with a certificate that is equivalent to the A-level, because that's the course of teaching that they will have gone through. Okay,
I'll just hold you there. And on this very issue, we have a story that will be running shortly. And the Ministry of Education introduced a restructured educational system that gradually replaced the ordinary and advanced level of certificate in 1987. It is now 40 years since the introduction of these very reforms. The reform was developed in response to criticism that the O and A-level system of education had been overly academic and did not satisfy the country's development and manpower trends. Now, the last ordinary level examinations was held in 1994, although remedial examinations continued to be administered through 1999. Now, under the new educational system, students spent 3 years at the senior high level. Under the old system, students spent 5 years at the O level and 2 years at the advanced level, totaling 7 years. Now, Reverend, right to what I just read, we had needs as a time, and we still have needs as a country. The Charismatic Bishops Conference has raised a concern. Now, we had to move because there was a situation at the time and some of these needs weren't met. It was said to be too academic. It was said to be quite, a lump sum of duration for students. Now, you've given some breakdown here, but as a country, for instance, we have these number of years for SHS, which is about 3.5 years, and we've done it back and forth already. We did see 2.5, 3 years and 4 years as well. And pupils are listening to this. The conversation goes on and on. Psychologically, for these children, how do we ensure that we stagger slowly to put what you want in place, even before we talk about the bit about money and where we're going to get all these things done?
So, we still think that the system that we've got in place, we're saying it's inferior because of the output it's coming up with and the certificates it's coming up with. So it's important to begin to produce outputs that are important. One of the things you mentioned is the manpower requirements for the country. The O levels didn't necessarily train people in how to speak English and arithmetic. If you look at the O-level program, for instance, if you went to Achimoto School, for instance, your first 3 years, you will be doing carpentry and you will do home science. That will teach you how to sew, that will teach you how to cook, you will do art, you will do carpentry, you will do textiles. So the O-level is not necessarily just about reading and writing. So I think there's a bit of a misnomer there when it's characterized that way. So we can still have the system where we say we need far more technical people and run that system with an O-level certification. And there were technical schools in this country that were running a very, very credible O-level system.
Still technical schools,
and that's exactly what we're saying. So these same technical schools, if we want technical people that can read, can write, can do the technical work, let them come out with a far more credible certificate that is not inferior, that is not as inferior as what we currently have, because the outputs that we're getting is not as credible. We're getting to, even the universities in Ghana insist, for instance, for the medical school, insist that somebody who's passed the SHS will be required to do an entrance exam before they get in. And that makes a big difference. So you need to improve the credibility. How do you improve the credibility? Set a superior standard. And the O and the A level in this country, we've seen it over decades. That has been a very, very credible system.
We're also trying to get an educationist to give his bit on this very issue. But in setting these standards and getting it straight, it's about finances. Do you think that the country has enough resources to do what you're talking about? How do we go about this process?
Yeah, we're sure the country has the resources to do it.
Even SHS, free SHS has become a problem. Politicians are dilly-dallying with this. How would this be done?
We're quite convinced about this, and we don't want to sort of draw this into some political conversation. So I would sort of be a bit quiet about that. But the country does have the resources. We're 100% convinced about that. That the country does have the resources to be able to support what we're thinking of doing, what we're suggesting that the country does. We're not worried at all, if you ask me. And I can sit down with you and work through the numbers with you. But the country does have the resources. I can tell you that assuredly.
Thank you so much, Reverend, for your time. I have been speaking with the General Secretary, Charismatic Bishops Conference.